So we've talked a little bit about how anger management is kind of like exposure therapy, right? And that's kind of what you're doing here. You're putting the red cape out, and you're seeing, can the bull here hang on to it a little bit better? Can they handle seeing the cape before they get really upset? So some of the themes in this session involve recognizing that it's easier to cope with problems if we don't feel so angry. And that's really kind of a basic underlying assumption for this whole program. And it's really where we started on this many years ago, where we really felt that if kids had better methods for handling their emotions, then whatever methods they have for thinking about problems will have a better chance of working. So how do we go about reducing our feelings of anger? So there are three classes of techniques that we will talk with kids about. So distraction. So distraction involves focusing your attention away from whatever it is that seems provocative in the moment. Now, what you're actually focusing your attention on could be almost anything, frankly. So it could be something pretty nice and enjoyable that you did yesterday with a peer or at your home with your family. It could be something that you think you're going to be planning to do today. So that maybe you've got some sports practice later today, and that would be good. You like that sport, so I'm going to try to think about that. Or it could be something very concrete. One of the first times, frankly, that I became more aware of the power of this whole idea of distraction was when we were doing some role plays around anger management with kids in a group. And there was this one kid who really handled, so there's a role play where there's a teasing activity. And this one kid handled it really quite well. Seemed to be very cool about it all. And the therapist asked the child, how did they do it? Managed to kind of ignore all of this stuff that's going on so well. And so the child talked about looking at this funny monkey that was up on the wall. So it was this drawing of a weird monkey that was on the wall of this classroom that they were actually conducting in. So very minor, very concrete, very simple, but actually worked for this kid. So the key is whatever works for the child and being able to distract or direct attention can help. It removes you from the heat of the moment. So that can be pretty individualized. Self-instructions or self-statements, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then relaxation. And the primary method for relaxation that we're going to talk about here in this workshop is deep breathing. Now, actually in the manual, there's another method for relaxation that's also there, but I think we found over time that deep breathing is just easier for kids to use, to learn, and then to actually use once they go about their everyday work. So we're going to brainstorm with the kids ways to cope with each level of anger. So we're going to keep that anger thermometer in mind. We're going to realize that you might actually use different methods when you're a little bit angry, sort of frustrated, when you're medium angry, and then when you're really angry. So for me, what I think about in terms of how this adjusts up and down, it's kind of like when my wife and I had children and we had Lamaze training. And so the notion of Lamaze training is that Lamaze is that you're going to have different ways of breathing with different ways of pain. And I tried to empathize with my wife here and understand this, but I know she did use different ways of breathing, and that it probably helped at least somewhat. But the concept is very similar. So right? So we want kids to think that you're going to start using certain coping methods when you're a little bit angry. That may not work. I'm starting to get more angry, but there's something else I can do, right? I can breathe different. And then there's something else I can do. I breathe different. So there's, you're encouraging persistence and resilience on the part of kids in the face of difficult moments. So what do we mean by self-statements? So these are examples. So these are things that the child would say to themselves. So this is based on the notions of the early developmental research of Luria and Vygotsky, and where they observed that young children, as they began to become more organized in their play, would start to do things first by saying things out loud to guide their behavior, and then they began, as they got a little bit older, to also engage in the same behavior but not say anything out loud. So the observation was that there were these guiding thoughts that went underground. So what you were saying outside became your thoughts. And for our children that we're working with, we want them to practice talking about these self-statements with the hope that they go underground. So they're going to say them out loud as we practice them, but then they're going to go away from that later. And we do have examples that we show the kids. Out of this set, there's one of them that is really generated by a child versus what we generated. So if you had to guess, what is a child-generated self-statement?
I'll grow up.
Perfect. Yep. It's the best one by far, and we can't claim it. So ultimately, what we're interested in is having kids really create a set of self-statements they themselves can use that are in their own words. They're more likely to use it, it's more likely to have personal meaning, more likely to remember it. But we'll seed it by giving them some at the beginning. So we have handouts where we have examples that we show them. Okay, there's a sequence of activities we go through here. And as Carolyn displayed with the activities on the organizational and study skills area, our goal here is to go through some initial activities that have low demand, low interpersonal demand, but where you can kind of get the moral of the story across, where you can kind of understand what it is that is the purpose of this unit that we're in. So I could use a volunteer. Okay, you want to do it? Okay, if you can stand up here. Your name? Teresa, great. Okay, Teresa, what I'm going to do here is show you 10 cards, and you'll have 10 seconds to remember the numbers. You don't have to remember the colors. You don't have to remember the suits. So just the numbers, okay? All 10. Okay. And the rest of our group here today, of our group members, are going to help you practice how a certain good skill about how you can screen out distracting things. And they're going to help you in that way by making lots of noise and trying to distract you. They're going to think of things that they can say that might be distracting. Now remember about the rules of the group though, right? So the rules of the group are you can't swear, you can't say nasty things of that sort, you can't, no hitting. But you guys, if you're going to help Teresa, you have to make lots of noise, right? So are you ready? Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. Ready, set, go. Okay. Excellent group. Good job of making that very hard for Teresa and for being quiet as soon as we stopped. That was good. That was excellent. Okay. Teresa, if you can write down as many of those numbers as you can remember in any order.
How many were there?
There should be 10. Okay. Okay. Tell you what. So you circle the ones as I read them off. Okay. 8, 9, 4, 6, 7, 2, 9, 3, 5, 6. So, Teresa, how many did you remember?
All of them.
All of them. 10 out of 10. That's a remarkable feat. You know, it's very.
They're in order, and I
Okay, so the way in which you remembered them was the order and then the doubles. Is that right? Okay, so those were good techniques for keeping track of them, right? And it probably doesn't mean that I didn't shuffle these up enough too. Is that the other thing? But that was very good. What else but I heard lots of other distracting stuff going on from our friends in the group here, right? How did you screen that out?
I just didn't listen. I had to figure out a way to organize the numbers.
Okay, so you didn't listen, you just really put all of your attention right on those numbers. Is that right? No attention on anything else, just right on those numbers. How did you not listen?
I mean, I heard it, but it didn't matter to me what it was.
Okay, so you didn't listen for the sounds or the words or whatever.
I didn't hear my name. I didn't hear anybody calling me a bad name, so.
So you were okay with it up to that point. So you did a very good job of screening out, right? And that helped you to be able then to pay attention as well as you did. So that's very good. So this would be an activity that we do in the group with the kids. I can guarantee you're not going to get kids remember all 10. So this is the kind of activity that, if you think about this from a working memory perspective, ordinarily the most that we can keep active in our working memory is about 7 things or so, roughly. And what Teresa was able to do was to enhance that by grouping things in certain ways. So that kind of helps. Some kids pick up on that right away, and that'll help them. But ordinarily, kids will get some number less than that. But it doesn't matter. So if kids remember 2, so if you remember 2, right, and say, oh, that's wonderful, that's great. How'd you remember 2? And you would go through the same thing. So you want to be upbeat, reinforcing of kids. You don't want to make this weirdly competitive within the group. It's going to have a little bit of a competitive feel. But you want to yourself be just very supportive of kids. And then you want to ask those same questions for everybody. How did you do as well as you did? Right? So you might remember 2, but at least you remember 2. So how did you remember 2? How did you remember that? And as you go around the group, so you give everybody in the group a chance to do it, further around the group you get sometimes the tactics they indicate are mirrored tactics from what other people have said, and that's okay. It's also okay if they've made them up on the spot, which they sometimes do. But if they've made it up on the spot, at least that's something that they're more likely to think about and remember in the future. And after we go around with everybody, we come back and then we ask kids to do it again. Typically, kids actually do remember it. You're not going to beat 10, by the way. But we'll remember more the next time that they do it. So the moral of the story is...
Learn to
filter out distractions, to be in control, right? Control your attention and be able to screen out or ignore things that are distracting to you. And if you do that, you do well, right? You get a good number, right?
What if they don't remember any?
I personally have not had anybody who's never remembered any. Just the odds of chance suggest that they should remember something there, I think.
They usually get at least 4.
Okay, there's another task. I don't think we have them here, but look, I could just explain it, I guess. So we do a similar task with dominoes, and we ask kids to, on a table here, stack dominoes on their sides, not flat, which is the easy way, but to stack them the hard way, and to stack as many as they can get, and then do it within 15 seconds or some defined period of time. And again, the other kids get to make distracting noises. There's usually additional rules, like you can't blow on the tower, you can't knock the table, things like that. But other than that, it's the same kind of task. And we find that some kids, in fact, are in fact more fine motor agile than they are number memory agile. And so they may not have done so well in the number memory, but actually on fine motor tasks like this, they do better. And it's again meant to be this kind of fun activity where you make the the same kind of point with them. So with those kind of tasks, we kind of have laid sort of a groundwork with them. And then so now we want to start practicing some of the anger management stuff. So Oriental Express is our friend, right? The Oriental training, whatever it is. So we don't go for the fancy ones like Carolyn Webster Stratton. We pride ourselves on going for the inexpensive, rather ugly ones. And that. Do I have a volunteer? Okay. So you can pick your puppet. Okay. So Amanda, so last week we were working on how we could screen out things that were distracting to us. Do you remember how we did the cards? How'd you do on the cards?
Well, I only got 2 right, but I practiced.
4. That was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was pretty neat. What did you do to be able to remember 4?
Well, I tried to ignore everybody, and then I had to tell myself that they were just trying to mess me up. So I tried harder. I didn't want.
Okay, so you were trying to screen it out, and then you kind of told yourself that you didn't want to let the other people mess you up. Did that help? Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of helped you a little bit. Okay. So we're going to try something different today. So I've got this, apparently a cow, I think. Does that look like that to you? Yeah. Okay, so I've got the cow. And you've got a University of Alabama elephant, it looks like to me. But, your elephant is going to say some things about my cow, about how my cow is or what my cow looks like or whatever. And my cow is going to practice how to control its feelings, how to control its anger. Okay? So the way the elephant can help the cow is to really think of some things to say. Okay, so because that'll help him to practice. He needs help practicing, right? Okay, you ready? Yeah. Go.
Hey cow, why are you being so quiet? You're not even looking at me. Are you scared of me? You know, elephants are way tougher than cows. And cows, all they do is sit around on farms all day, while elephants get to run around in the jungle and do cool things all day long. And we have big trunks, and all you have are those little horns.
I don't care what she says. She doesn't know me. She doesn't know me. She doesn't know me. She's not part of my barnyard. I don't know her. I don't know her. I don't know her. I don't care.
What, you're not looking at me? Are you scared of me? I've heard that cows are pretty wussy, and they're not nearly as tough as elephants are, because they're so much bigger than cows.
Okay. Okay, elephant. That's okay. We've got it now, elephant. That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay, the elephant really worked very hard here to get the cow stirred up, right? Okay. All right. This time, let's flip here. Okay. And so the cow is going to say things to the elephant here. Okay, so think about it. Think about what the elephant should do in order to manage this. Got some things in mind? Yeah. Okay. Hey, you big nose. Look at that big nose just sticking up there. Hey.
Just jealous of my beautiful big nose.
What a color that
cow just wishes he was an elephant.
That elephant has the pinkest ears. I don't know if I've ever seen pink ears on any animal. What is? And look at those eyes there. They kind of look like they would be eyes for a big bug or something. I don't know. You know, it's not. It's not.
He doesn't know what it's like to be a cool elephant like me.
Okay. So what did the elephant do here to handle?
Took some deep breaths and tried to think about why the cow was doing it. Because he was just jealous. I think he thinks the whole feel better.
Okay. And did it work?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's just pause here for a minute. So questions about this or observations about it?
It certainly reaches children. It's a totally different way of bringing the points home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it does. And so it's fun, and it's also very, very purposefully in the third person, right? So we're not doing it between you and I here. It's between these things. So and the kids understand that. So what that provides is an opportunity to practice in this third person, and for me to observe, are you kind of getting the idea? And are you able to maintain distance while doing it? Because some kids don't. You know, it's meant to be a role play, right, but they'll do something like that. So it becomes much more active. That would tell you that this is a child who would be much more fragile, right? That their ability to maintain control is even more limited. That means that once we go further along in these activities, I need to really go slow, right? I need to slow down even more with this particular person. So you're paying a lot of attention clinically throughout all of this activity.
Diagnostic as well.
It is very diagnostic, actually, very much so. You'll also find that there are some kids who are otherwise fairly interactive, or at least reasonably interactive in the group, but they're reluctant to be the one coming up, especially as the victim with the puppet. And that can be also pretty important to pay attention to. It means that they're anxious, that the potentially being targeted is pretty anxiety-provoking for the kids. So, okay, let me think here. What are we doing here? 4:30. What I'd like to do here is to do a somewhat bigger role play too. And why don't we go ahead and stick with the puppets? Can we have 3 other people come up? And are you willing to stay up here for a minute? Yeah. 3 other people. Okay, so you guys remember how last week, it's always last week by the way, but you remember last week how Amanda here was using the elephant to practice with the cow about how the elephant could, both the cow and then the elephant could use self-control. And they really did it pretty well, right? So this time it's going to be harder. Right? You guys are all going to help to make it harder. And Amanda, do you want to have the elephant be in the middle again? Sure. Okay. Is the elephant ready to do it?
I think the elephant's okay.
You think so? Okay. So what we're going to start to do here is have all of us at the same time talk about the elephant. Okay. We're going to
think the elephant's mouth.
Okay, so here we go. Let's go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, the elephant's ready. Okay, here we go.
You're big and ugly.
It's not like your nose. They're just trying to make me mad.
That's a pretty large nose. That's a rather large.
Yeah, like stupid nose.
Stupid saying very nice things, but they don't know me. You know, these aren't my friends. My friends like
Why would
not
you
want
want
to
to
Okay, very good. So, you did it last week when it was only just the 2 puppets. How was it this time? Was that different?
Yeah, I mean, I actually thought it was a little bit easier because there was so many people talking that I could.
You don't have to concentrate on
Yeah,
Well, that's cool.
When it's one-on-one, you feel like you have to answer that person. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
So it made it easier for you. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Plus, I practice.
One thing I was just thinking is I wonder for kids, do they get more aggressive in the things that they say than adults would with each other?
You mean, do they begin to?
Do they get meaner and say things and provoke each other?
Well, a lot of times you have to be very careful about the rules you've set up for the activity, especially the words, and then also touch. So, a little lion was coming over here, so the cow was about ready to sacrifice itself in the middle, and it would have not been a pretty sight, would have gone down. But where you might have to kind of arrange the situation. Okay, let me before you all sit down here, let me try one more thing. So while we're all up, so we want to transition from this activity into a live role play activity. right? And then that's where all of our skills really need to be really on the top, because we're really going to be putting kids in situations that are fairly hot for them. So this time, so that's parenthetical. I wouldn't tell the kids that, by the way, but that's what we're doing. Okay, you guys did so good at using all the puppets last week that we're going to go on and we're going to try the next thing now, okay? And I'm going to be the person in the middle first. And you all can say something about one thing of mine. So now, do you remember on my anger thermometer, when we all did anger thermometers, do you remember that? And I did one too for myself. Do you remember what I had kind of at the bottom of my anger thermometer, one of the things? Frustrating. I was frustrated, and you know what made me frustrated is if somebody made fun of my tie, you know, that it would frustrate me. Just right down there, okay? So what you guys can do is to say things about my tie, right? It's on my anger thermometer.
Polka dots in your tie?
Yeah, that's what it is, yes. That's what exactly it is, yes. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn and face the wall here, okay? Because I'm going to be saying some things out loud while you're doing this, but these are going to be my thoughts to myself while you're saying this. Okay, so I'm just facing here, and you guys are there. Ready? Go.
Where did you get that silly tie? It's got polka dots all over
I picked out that tie myself, and I'm really, really proud of it. I think it's one of my favorite ties. I don't care. I mean, they don't know it. This is one of my favorite ties. Brand new tie, and I really, really like it. I think that's, in fact, my wife even picked it out. Okay. So, in actually kind of beginning to use this kind of activity with kids, you can also do this with the puppets. One of the good things to do is to turn away. So that helps me to titrate the effect even more, right? So I'm not looking at you while you're saying something about me. So I have control over it. And then I'm also showing much more clearly that what I'm saying is not a retort to you, because that's a natural tendency for these kids once they get into self-statements. But instead, I'm saying it to the wall. So that is clearer to indicate that, you know, it's inside my head. Okay, how did it feel for you doing this activity?
It was less satisfying because you don't see the person's response.
So you were even more frustrated, weren't you? Yeah. Good.
It wasn't easy for me to critique your time. You know, I had to overcome something to do it.
Because why?
Because I don't want to be mean to you.
Okay. So kids will be like that to us, right? And you know, I think we want to start out at the low level of the anger thermometer anyway, but that can also help with that. So this isn't the thing that really gets me, you know, most upset. And so if I sensed that somebody was having that concern, then probably what I should have done at the beginning is to say, you know, you guys can really help me. I could have reinforced that all over again. You guys can really help me to practice my self-control by talking about my time. So you're helping me by doing this. So that's the frame you want to give to this a lot as you're going into it. You guys are just helping. It's not like this is a bully victim activity. That's not the frame we want to have for it. It's more that you guys are helping me do that. Yeah?
Maybe this might be a good opportunity to praise them for not breaking the rules and not being nasty and being...
That'd be great, yep. So I think you're exactly right. So you stuck within the rules that we had set up. You really kept the teases here to my tie. You guys did a great job at that.
Good teasing.
Yeah, I was grateful. Was there another comment?
No, I'm sorry. I just said it was a good teasing. It was not bad teasing.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, yeah.
As opposed to bad.
Okay, any questions about this, about how it goes?
Do you get every member in the group to participate simultaneously in this kind of...
So the default is that, you know, is that there would be, and I'm always modeling it first. So I want to be the model to show how it's done. And that also lets me illustrate, you know, how to do things, but I can also see, do you all get the concept? You know, do you have
So
the
do you have the child who's going to be the next one, who's the target, who's going to be practicing those strategies? You have them rehearse those, talk about what they're going to do first before you put them in that situation. So, Leslie, what are you going to do to keep your frustration low? What are you going to say to yourself? So they rehearse that first.
Yeah, I think it's actually a great idea, especially the very first time that you do it. So you can have them.
You want them to have success. Right?
You want them to have success very much. And so saying out loud, what are your statements? What are your relaxation methods you're going to use? Whatever, anything that you can do to make it overt. And then we have, assuming we have 2 co-leaders, so there's another co-leader, and the other co-leaders available to help coach. So if you have a child who's in here and they look like they've hit the wall, they don't quite know what to do, then what we want to do is have one of the co-leaders come in and help to coach the child during that period of time. So our role, once we begin having the kids interact, is we're not, as a therapist, I'm not the teaser. You know, I'm not doing that. But I'm available to assist the child, to coach, to help them handle it. I think having them say out loud first what they're going to do helps, and then reinforcing that as you go along.
Now, do you use the thermometer? I read somewhere that you actually have a big one on the floor.
Right. Well, the very first time, what we typically do is we'll have tape, and we'll tape out a safe area on the floor, so you guys are outside of it, outside of arm's length, away from me. And so when you're engaged in this activity, you're out there, and I'm in here, and it's safe. And then, what's that? Can we sit now? Can you sit now? Yeah, you can sit now. Yeah, thank you. So we use the thermometer for other next steps in this anger management, and then also when we're just doing role plays. And so you can have kids move up and down. They can indicate where they would be at that point on the thermometer, and then as they practice a skill or whatever they're doing, they can adjust, indicate where they would be, maybe going up or going down, whichever way they're going. Okay. So what's useful about this kind of thing is it's just nice with kids to mix it up. Just have you're still dealing with the same concept, but you don't have to just keep describing it in the same way. So kids like it if there's a different version of it. Yes, question?
I was going to say, do you let them pick, I'm assuming you let them pick what people are going to tease them about. Do you encourage, is it like exposure where you want them to pick something that's a little bit of a trigger but not too much of a trigger? Or
Yeah, so before you do this activity, I think the safest thing to do is to let the kids know that this is what we're going to do. So this would be a great time to have one of those, some of those individual meetings in the couple of weeks right prior to this. So we're going to build up to this. And when we get to it, which things is it okay for the other kids to say? And so where I would start would be from each child's anger thermometer, and just assume that it's probably something at the low end of that. But even that might be too hot. In that case, then we want the child to think of other things. And so we want the child to be in control. We want it to be safe to the child. My role as a therapist is I want to certainly expose children to things that make them angry, but I don't want to overload them. So I'm going to watch carefully, and if I'm picking up any cues while the activity is going on that a child's starting to get too tense or too tight or looks too uncomfortable, you're in control of it. You just stop it. You know, the kids don't know how long it really goes, or they don't understand that very well. So you just say, oh, okay, you guys did a great job, so that's enough. If you're worried, if you're sensing that a particular child is unusually tight, then I wouldn't include him, frankly. I'd say, okay, over the next few weeks, we're all going to have a chance to do that. Today, we're just going to have a chance for some of us to do it, and we're going to practice that out, and then we'll come back later on. We have had some instances where I've observed groups where we've allowed the teases to be too broad. In fact, that's initially, or early ways of doing this, it was just kind of wide open. It was whatever people would say. And you always learn from what you do. And So one of the ones that sticks in my mind particularly was a boy who might have been 9 or so, and he had his leg amputated around his knee, and so he had a prosthetic that he had for the lower part of his leg. And this is when we were in North Carolina. He'd wear shorts with this prosthetic every single day. In the middle of winter, he'd be wearing shorts, So, and he would do things like when he had free time with the other guys, he'd take the prosthetic off and have him sniff it because it really smelled bad at the bottom. So he'd kind of gross him out. So on the surface of it, what you would see is a child who was compensating, was dealing with what's going on. When we got to this activity, I was observing this group, and you notice that this is a kid who usually was pretty extroverted, pretty smooth, was not this particular day. It was pretty tight, and he looked tight going in there. And so there was this rope, the teasing going on. One of the other kids said something about his leg, and he just got like a rock, And you could tell this really hit home way too close, and he's not as comfortable with this nearly as it looks like he's showing people. So we had to end it. He didn't, it wasn't. He recovered from that. He did okay, but it was a good learning experience, and it also led me to think that, in general, it's not a good idea to let kids tease each other about their body parts. Just in general, that most people are too sensitive about their body. It's not just the prosthetic, but almost anything. But the other incident that occurred, and this is observing a videotape of a session, again, some years ago, where it was a very telling example of what not to do. So there was a group in a school, and they had it set up so that the boy who was receiving the teasing was in the middle of a circle, and they had circled the chairs around them, kind of like a wagon train, and the other kids were outside of it. So that was set up okay, so it's kind of safe for the kid. And the boy that was in there was kind of a quiet boy usually, and actually seemed to be handling it fairly well, handling what was going on. And it was going on for some seconds, and he was doing fine. And then off camera, you could hear this voice say, "Cry, baby," and you could just see this kid, kind of do that same reaction. There's something got tight. And then within about 2 seconds, one of the kids said, "Cry, baby," and then this kid in the middle lost it and tried to jump out there and get the other kid. So the off-camera voice was one of the therapists. So one of the therapists knew that this was a trigger, that this was exactly a trigger that was getting this kid into a lot of trouble, and was providing this to help the child practice. So it was one of those moments where you realize, you really need to start at the bottom here. You can't go at the top. You can't go for the thing. Ultimately, that's exactly what you do want the child to be able to tolerate better, obviously, but not at the beginning. That's at a much later point in time. So again, we start at the bottom, move up. Watch your kids carefully when you're doing this. Okay, other questions about this? Do you all do anything like this at all? Any kind of role play like this? Are you nervous about it? No? Okay. Anybody? Any questions?
I used to teach about your intervention when I was teaching child interventions. I haven't done it, but we would discuss it. And it was really interesting to watch the trainees' reactions to this idea year to year, and there seemed to be some gender differences. Like a lot of male therapists were a lot more comfortable with this because they were like, "Oh yeah, that's what guys do." And we watched the older video that you guys had where the kids were doing more general teasing, and so there were a lot of girls that were like, "If that were my child, I'd yank them out of school," and and so it was interesting. There was a large range of sort of reactions, and I think when I was teaching it better, I kind of taught it from an exposure perspective. I think the students got it. But, I think really understanding the purpose behind it was important for therapists to be able to sort of get in the right mindset to do something like that.
Yeah, I think that's critical, in that sense of what am I doing as I conduct this activity to protect the person who's in there. And the other side of it is that if this child's really going to get better, they're going to have to be exposed to this. So we have to figure out how to do it in a way that's constructive and helpful. Yeah.
I've worked with this before, but one of the things that they often try to tell us to do, and I wondered what you thought about that, is have them practice more of the behavior you want versus role modeling the behavior you don't want. Now, obviously, these kids have, I'm sure in their own communities, plenty of opportunities to practice teasing, so it probably comes naturally to them. But I wonder about using them as often on the flip side, role modeling and getting that practice. Is the benefit outweighs more than this practice? You know what I'm saying? Where
So I kind of lost it at the very
I'm
last.
sorry, yeah. It more. I've been trying to think of ways to have more role modeling where I'm the one doing the inappropriate behavior and they're practicing the appropriate versus
I see. As the therapist, you're the one who's...
versus the students doing it and getting practice now being
Right.
the flip side. That was one thought that came to mind. And then the other is they go home and then they get more practice of the negative stuff. They get exposed to all that stuff at home from their big brothers or sisters or this or that. And they come in with far more colorful things to add
All right.
in the session.
So I think the response would be that in general, I think that kids actually do tolerate this. That there really aren't very many instances where they can't, and especially if you do start with taunts that are at that low level, and gradually work up. So I think that's the key. But if there was a child that I was worried about, maybe because of the history, there's a child with very reactive, aggressive, just incredibly quick temper. At that point that this is how they get in trouble. Then I think your point's a good adaptation for that child at that time. So I'm the one who's going to do it and do it alone because I can adjust it very carefully for that child. And if I was worried that the rest of the group, there were some group members who were going to get off on this by practicing these low-level teases, then I think that would be another reason to do it yourself. But I think in general, the general experience that I've had is that kids already know this, and especially if we don't escalate it up to these high skill areas, there is this thing that's kind of like a street social skill that these kids have, where they try to outdo each other, and it used to be called playing the dozens years ago. That it's where you're trying to do the other person with your taunts and teases, and be very creative. And sometimes they're very funny, actually, when kids do it. But then other kids are not as quick and they're not as easy. So you just don't want it to go there. You don't want it to move to that level.
John, do you ever run these groups just with girls?
Yes.
I'm interested to know if there are there any differences at all, because girls, very relationally aggressive girls, that's a very different dynamic working with a group of those kinds of girls than with a group of boys who are aggressive. A mixed group.
Right. So in terms of the activity, I don't think there really is. I think the girls can get into this activity and understand the function of the activity certainly as well as the boys. I think it's wise to be sensitive to relational aggression because that can occur, but we know that relational aggression is not restricted to girls, so really it can happen pretty easily. In fact, it co-varies with how aggressive you are. So boys that are really physically aggressive are probably doing relational aggressive stuff. So it's important, no matter what the gender of the child, I think, to be sensitive to that. One of the units, I think I mentioned that we're working with this group up in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins to get this early adolescent version. And so within that program, we've added now a section on relational aggression and cyberbullying and that kind of stuff, or internet bullying, which can be relational as well. And as trying to target that more explicitly. I think that can be done in this program. It's just that you have to remember to do it. You have to come up with examples that are relational. So it's not prompted. Questions about the activity? Yeah.
One thing I was wondering about this particular activity is it seems like one thing that might help is that if the group has had some time to bond with each other and to develop some level of trust between them before you get to this point.
Yeah.
It's not like you're just starting from scratch.
Right.
With this particular activity.
Right. So in this sequence here, this is now session 7, 8 or so. So we're we've had some weeks together, and that can help. Certainly allows you also to sense if there are some kids that are natural, where you're going to be more careful. Okay. Anything else here for today? This is probably a good point to end. So tomorrow promptly at 9, right? Okay.